Since the year 2000, only 3 prisoners have met their end this way. A method that feels ripped from the 1800s but still lingers in the law books of 4 states: Utah, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. Utah, the last holdout, carried out its most recent firing squad execution in 2010, when Ronnie Lee Gardner, a man who'd spent 25 years on death row, famously said he'd rather die like a man with bullets than a lab rat with needles. Why does this method persist? Blame politics, desperation, and a macabre dance between tradition and modernity. As lethal injection drugs became scarce and courts debated their constitutionality, states like South Carolina revived the firing squad as a backup, practical solution wrapped in moral chaos. For inmates, choosing it isn't just about avoiding botched IVs or burning flesh. It's a twisted act of control. You want my life? I'll decide how you take it. This isn't just about how we kill. It's about who we are. Over the next hour, we'll walk through those 3 executions, the crimes that led to them, the final meals devoured, the last words whispered or shouted. We'll sit in the witness rooms where the air smells like gunpowder and grief and ask the uncomfortable question. In a world of advancing technology, why does the firing squad still haunt America's death row? The firing squad is a ritual of death that feels almost medieval in its simplicity. 5 marksmen stand behind a slot in a wall, each armed with a .30 caliber rifle. One of those rifles is loaded with a Blanca Small Mercy, meant to let each shooter cling to the hope that they didn't fire the fatal round. The condemned is strapped to a metal chair, sandbags stacked behind them to absorb the bullets. A white target, no larger than a playing card, is pinned over their heart. When the warden gives the signal, the shooters take aim. There's no countdown, no final prayer, just the deafening crack of gunfire and a life erased in seconds. This method wasn't always rare. In the 1800s, firing squads were commonplace, especially in the American West, where gallows were scarce and bullets were cheap. It was seen as soldierly, a nod to wartime executions. But as the 20th century dawned, states began favoring cleaner methods. The electric chair promised modernity, lethal injection, medical precision. By the 1980s, only Utah still kept the firing squad on the books, and even there, it became a relic until 2010, when Ronnie Lee Gardner, a career criminal who'd shot a lawyer during a courthouse escape, chose bullets over needles. "I'd rather die fast than rot on a gurney," he said. Today, the firing squad is making a morbid comeback. South Carolina, Mississippi, and Oklahoma have all reinstated it as a backup method, citing shortages of lethal injection drugs and botched executions. But critics aren't buying the pragmatism. The United Nations has condemned it as inherently cruel, arguing that even if death is instantaneous, the psychological torture for inmates and shooters is undeniable. After all, this isn't a clinical IV drip. It's violence made literal. The state literally painting a target on a human being. Ethical debates rage. Supporters claim it's more honest than methods that mask brutality behind hospital curtains. Opponents fire back. Why romanticize a practice rooted in military executions and lynch mobs? And what of the marksmen? Utah keeps their identities secret, but one anonymous shooter later confessed, "You don't forget the smell of gunpowder or the way the body jerks when the bullets hit." The firing squad forces us to stare, unblinking, at what execution really is not a medical procedure but a violent end. And as long as it lingers in America's penal code, it remains a ghost of our past, refusing to die. Case 1. Ronnie Lee Gardner. On the 2nd of April, 1985, began like any other Tuesday at the Salt Lake City courthouse. Attorneys shuffled through hallways clutching briefcases, jurors sipped coffee in the cafeteria, and bailiffs joked about their weekend plans. No one noticed Ronnie Lee Gardner, 24-year-old convicted murderer with a smirk permanently etched on his face, quietly plotting his escape. Gardner was no stranger to chaos. 2 years earlier, he'd shot and killed Melvin Otterstrom, a 37-year-old bartender, during a $99 robbery at Cheers Tavern. While awaiting trial for that murder, he'd sawed through jail cell bars using a hacksaw blade smuggled in by an accomplice. Now, shackled and flanked by guards in a second-floor courtroom, Gardner was back for a routine hearing related to another robbery charge. But routine wasn't in his vocabulary. At 10:45 a.m., Gardner's girlfriend, Teresa Tucker, slipped into the courthouse bathroom. Inside a tampon dispenser, she'd hidden a .22 caliber pistol wrapped in plastic. During a recess, Gardner asked to use the restroom. Guards unlocked his cuffs, and moments later, he emerged armed. What happened next was captured on grainy security footage. Gardner fired 6 shots in 11 seconds. Bailiff George Nick Kirk, a 53-year-old father of 4, took a bullet to the face and chest. Deputy Sheriff Bob McLeod, unarmed and lunging to tackle Gardner, was shot in the stomach. Attorney Michael Burdell, a 36-year-old pacifist who'd volunteered to defend Gardner's co-accused, was struck in the temple by a stray round as he sat at a counsel table. He died instantly. Gardner sprinted down the courthouse stairs, firing wildly at bystanders. He carjacked a woman's vehicle outside, but crashed it 2 blocks away. Police cornered him in a parking lot, where he tossed the gun and surrendered grinning. Gardner's trial was less a legal proceeding than a slow-motion car crash. Prosecutors painted him as a sociopath with a god complex, citing his jailbreak attempts and letters bragging about his crimes. His defense team, overworked and underfunded, argued he'd been failed by the system, a product of poverty and neglect. Gardner himself was the wild card. He refused to testify, scribbling cryptic notes to his lawyers instead. When the judge asked if he understood the charges, he replied, "I understand you'll want to fry me." The jury took 4 hours to sentence him to death. But Gardner wasn't done fighting. Over the next 25 years, he filed appeal after appeal, arguing everything from incompetent counsel to jury bias. In 2010, with options exhausted, Utah offered him a choice: lethal injection or firing squad. To everyone's shock, Gardner chose the bullets. "Lethal injection is for lab rats," he told his lawyers. "I'll die like a man." His decision forced Utah to revive a method it hadn't used since 1996 and sparked a national debate about what it means to die humanely. To understand Ronnie Lee Gardner is to wade into a swamp of contradictions. Born in 1961 to a teenage mother and an absent father, he grew up in Salt Lake City's gritty Glendale neighborhood. By 11, he was stealing cars. By 18, he'd graduated to armed robbery. Neighbors remembered him as a charmer quick to laugh, loyal to friends, a voracious reader of Louis L'Amour westerns. He wasn't born evil, his older sister Darlene later said, but the streets ate him alive. Prison records reveal a man equally capable of violence and vulnerability. In 1987, he stabbed a fellow inmate over a gambling debt. In 1995, he penned a heartfelt letter to a pen pal. "I dream about mountains and rivers, not concrete and barbed wire." By 2010, he'd converted to Mormonism, though guards rolled their eyes at his sudden piety. He'd quote scripture one minute, then brag about his crimes the next. In the weeks before his execution, Gardner gave a series of jailhouse interviews. To the Salt Lake Tribune, he admitted remorse for Burdell's death but doubled down on his choice. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a quick exit." Utah's death row is a fluorescent-lit purgatory. Gardner spent 25 years in a 6x9-foot cell, pacing like a caged tiger. He painted landscapes, wrote poetry, and became a jailhouse lawyer, helping other inmates file appeals. "He had a brilliant mind," said fellow death row inmate Troy Kell, "wasted on stupid choices." But Gardner's true obsession was escape. In 1994, he nearly tunneled out of prison using a plastic spoon. In 2001, he stockpiled razor blades and matches, planning to take a guard hostage. The plot was foiled, but Gardner shrugged it off. You gotta try, right? By 2010, time had softened his edges. His once athletic frame grew paunchy. His jet black hair turned salt and pepper. In a final interview, he mused, "I've spent half my life in a cage. Maybe death's the only way out." The last meal. On the 17th of June 2010, the night before his execution, Gardner was offered his final meal. He requested lobster tail, 16-ounce steak, apple pie, 7-Up. Prison staff raised eyebrows. Lobster in landlocked Utah? They sourced it from a local supermarket, microwaved and slapped onto a styrofoam plate. Gardner devoured every bite, later joking to guards, "Tastes better than rat poison." The meal wasn't just about hunger, it was theater. Gardner knew his last supper would be dissected in headlines, and he played to the gallery. "I want people to remember I went out on my terms," he said. Gardner spent his final day chain-smoking Marlboros and pacing his cell. He met with his daughter Brandy, who'd been born months after his arrest. "I'm not the monster they say I am," he told her. She left in tears. At 10 p.m., he was moved to a holding cell near the execution chamber. The room was bare except for a sink, a toilet, and a Bible. Gardner scribbled a final letter to his family, sealed it in an envelope, and handed it to a guard. "Don't read it," he warned. As midnight approached, he changed into a navy blue prison uniform. His hands were cuffed, his legs shackled. A chaplain offered a prayer. Gardner smirked. "Save it for the guys pulling the triggers." The execution. The firing squad chamber at Utah State Prison is a windowless concrete box, its walls scarred with bullet holes from past executions. At 12:05 a.m., on the 18th of June, Gardner was led inside and strapped to a black metal chair. Sandbags lined the wall behind him to stop the bullets. A white cloth, target 5 inches square, was pinned over his heart. 5 marksmen stood behind a cement wall, aiming through narrow slots. Each carried a .30-30 Winchester rifle loaded with a single round. One rifle held a blanker placebo to ease the shooters' consciences. Their identities were kept secret. State law shields them from scrutiny. Gardner's last words were brief. When asked if he had any final statement, he stared at the ceiling and growled, "I do not. No." At 12:15 a.m., the warden signaled. 5 shots rang out. Gardner's body jerked violently, then slumped. A physician pronounced him dead at 12:17 a.m. Outside the prison, protesters held candles and sang Amazing Grace. Inside, Gardner's daughter collapsed in the parking lot, screaming, "They killed my dad!" Gardner's execution made him a macabre folk hero. Media outlets dubbed him the last gunslinger, romanticizing his choice as a defiant stand against a broken system. Victims' families weren't buying it. "He died quick," said Burdell's brother Don. "My brother didn't get that luxury." In 2015, Utah abolished the firing squad only to revive it in 2022 as a backup method. Gardner's ghost lingers in every debate. Was he a cold-blooded killer or a product of his chaos? A man who cheated death until death cheated him? His final letter, later leaked to the press, offered no answers. It read, "To my family I'm sorry, to the rest see you in hell." Case 2. John Albert Burks. It was 11:45 p.m. on the 20th of January 1989, when 58-year-old Jesse Contreras locked the doors of Jesse's Tortilla Factory in Waco, Texas. A father and small business owner, Jesse had spent decades building his shop into a local staple, kneading dough by hand and rising before dawn to supply restaurants across central Texas. That night, he counted $287 in the register, mostly crumpled bills and coin sand, called his daughter Gloria to say, "Be home by midnight. Love you." He never made it. John Albert Burks, a 25-year-old with a history of armed robbery, had been casing the shop for weeks. Desperate for cash, he waited in the shadows until Jesse flipped the open sign to closed. As Jesse bent to grab his keys, Burks smashed the glass door with a crowbar. Jesse froze, hands raised. "Take the money," he pleaded. Burks did. Then he took more. Burks's cousin, Nancy Cobb, had been a regular customer for years. The .38 revolver shook in Burks's hand. One shot to the chest. Jesse collapsed behind the counter, gasping as blood pooled around him. Burks rifled through his pockets, stole his keys, and fled in Jesse's pickup truck. The vehicle was found abandoned 2 miles away. Fingerprints on the steering wheel. The murder weapon under the seat. Jesse's body was discovered by his son-in-law at 5 a.m. Burks vanished for 72 hours. Police found him holed up in a motel outside Waco, surrounded by fast food wrappers and empty beer cans. When SWAT teams breached the room, Burks surrendered without a fight. "I didn't mean to kill him," he slurred. "The gun just went off." But ballistics told a different story. The single bullet had been fired at point-blank range. Trajectory angled downward, proof Jesse was on his knees when Burks pulled the trigger. Prosecutors called it execution style. Burks's public defender argued temporary insanity, citing his troubled upbringing and a lifetime of poverty. No one bought it. John Albert Burks' 1990 trial was a circus. His cousin Nancy, now a waitress, testified against him, sobbing as she described his spiral into violence. "He wasn't always like this," she said. "Something broke in him." Burks' mother, Darlene, took the stand in his defense. She blamed herself. "I let his stepdad beat him. I didn't protect him." The jury didn't care. They saw the security footage. They held Jesse's blood-stained apron. The clincher came when Burks' cellmate, a career snitch named Eddie Rat Malone, claimed Burks bragged about the murder. He said, "That old man looked at me like I was trash, so I trashed him." Malone's testimony earned him a reduced sentence for burglary. On the 12th of November, 1994, Burks was sentenced to death. As the judge read the verdict, he stared at the floor and muttered, "Ain't no God in this room." Texas's death row at Huntsville Prison is a concrete purgatory. Burks spent 28 years in a 6x9-foot cell, pacing like a caged animal. He refused visits from family, ignored letters from pen pals, and spat at chaplains. Guards nicknamed him Ghost for his pale, gaunt face and hollow eyes. But in 2021, something shifted. Texas's execution schedule accelerated amid legal battles over drug protocols. In 2014, a botched lethal injection in Oklahoma made national headlines. In 2015, another inmate screamed, "This stuff burns," as chemicals filled his veins. By 2022, Texas had executed over 200 inmates since 1982, more than any other state. Burks saw no opening. His appeals were exhausted. On the 14th of June, 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected his final plea for a stay. On the 14th of June, 2022, the afternoon of his execution, Burks was offered his final meal. He requested fried chicken, 3 pieces, extra crispy. Collard greens, cooked with bacon fat, his mama's recipe. Cornbread, with honey butter on the side. Peach cobbler, a la mode. Vanilla ice cream melting over the crust. The prison kitchen nailed the collards but burned the cornbread. Burks didn't complain. He ate in silence, wiping his plate clean with his fingers. When a guard asked if he wanted seconds, Burks laughed. "Nah, I'm saving room for hell." Later, he told a chaplain, "Tastes like my mum's cooking. Too bad I never thanked her." Burks spent his last day writing letters. To his cousin Nancy, "I'm sorry I ruined your life. Tell Mama I love her." To Jesse's daughter Gloria, "I wish I could trade places with him. I really do." He sealed the letters but never mailed them. At 4 p.m., he met with his mother for the first time in 15 years. Darlene, now wheelchair-bound and oxygen-dependent, clutched a Bible to her chest. "God forgives you," she whispered. Burks rolled his eyes. "Save it, Mama. God checked out a long time ago." By 5:30 p.m., the prison was swarming with media. News vans lined the perimeter. Helicopters circled overhead. Jesse's family held a vigil outside, holding photos of him and chanting, "Justice for Jesse." Burks, meanwhile, chain-smoked Newports in his holding cell. When a guard offered him a Xanax to calm his nerves, he refused. "I want to feel it all," he said. Texas's execution chamber is a sterile, windowless room with pale green walls and a gurney bolted to the floor. At 6 p.m., Burks was led inside, shackles clanking. He wore a white prison uniform. The words, "Inmate 976,532" stenciled on the back. A heart monitor beeped faintly. Warden Greg Williams asked Burks if he had final words. His reply echoed through the chamber, "Tell my family to take care." Huntsville's death chamber is a windowless concrete room with a rusted steel chair bolted to the floor. At 6:10 p.m., Burks was strapped to the chair, a white target pinned over his heart. He wore a navy jumpsuit, the words "Inmate 99-0321" stenciled on the sleeve. 5 marksmen stood behind a partition, rifles loaded with .30-30 cartridges. One round was a blank. Warden Jim Willett asked for final words. Burks grinned. "Tell the Raiders they're gonna win it all. Let's roll." At 6:18 p.m., the signal was given. 5 shots cracked through the chamber. Burks's body lurched forward, then slumped. A doctor pronounced him dead at 6:20 p.m. Nancy wailed in the witness room, screaming, "Lord have mercy," until guards escorted her out. Outside, Gloria addressed reporters. "We grieve for his family, but justice was served." Asked about the death penalty, she paused. "The Bible says an eye for an eye, but mercy is still possible." Burks became the 221st inmate executed in Texas since 1982 and the first by firing squad in modern state history. Guards found his letters and a note. "Burn this place down." The execution team's identities remain sealed, but one marksman later retired. "No man should have that power," he said, "even if he's scum." Texas has since carried out over 500 executions. John Albert Burks, a killer who mocked justice until the end, is now a statistic in a decades-old debate. How much punishment is enough? Case 3. Richard Moore. James Mahoney's cash and carry convenience store in Spartanburg, South Carolina, wasn't just a business, it was a relic. Opened in 1972, its flickering neon sign and cracked linoleum floors had survived recessions, hurricanes, and the rise of Walmart. On the night of the 16th of November, 2001, Mahoney, a 58-year-old Vietnam vet with a prosthetic leg, was closing up alone. The register held $50.28. Richard Moore, a 22-year-old father of 2, had other plans. High on crack and desperate to pay a debt to his dealer, Moore lurked in the alley behind the store, a rusty .32 revolver tucked into his waistband. When Mahoney flipped the deadbolt at 10:15 p.m., Moore lunged. Surveillance footage showed him shoving Mahoney backward, the older man stumbling over his prosthetic. "Just take the money," Mahoney yelled, tossing the cash drawer at Moore's feet, but Moore froze. Later, he'd tell police, "I saw my dad in his face." Mahoney, seizing the hesitation, swung his metal cane. The blow grazed Moore's temple. Enraged, Moore fired a wild shot that shattered a bottle of Jack Daniels. Mahoney lunged again, and the second bullet struck him in the throat. Moore fled with $37 and a pack of Marlboro Reds. Mahoney bled out on the floor, his hand gripping a photo of his late wife Helen, tucked in his shirt pocket. The manhunt. Moore didn't get far. The gun, traced to a pawn shop in Greenville, led police to his girlfriend's apartment. They found him passed out in a bathtub, still clutching the Marlboros. During interrogation, Moore alternated between sobbing and rage. "I didn't want to kill him," he insisted. "He came at me." Forensics told a grimmer story. The fatal shot had been fired downward, execution style, as Mahoney lay choking on his own blood. Prosecutors argued premeditation. Moore's public defender, a rookie named Lisa Mween, pushed for manslaughter. "This wasn't a hitman," she pleaded. "This was a scared kid." The jury took 3 days to disagree. On the 14th of March, 2003, Moore was sentenced to death. As the judge read the verdict, Mahoney's daughter Sarah shouted, "Rot in hell." Moore stared at his shackled hands and whispered, "I'm already there." Death row. South Carolina's Broad River Correctional Institution is a tomb of concrete and barbed wire. Moore spent 21 years in a cell the size of a parking spot, filling notebooks with Bible verses and letters to his daughters. "I'm not the monster they say I am," he wrote. "I'm just a man who made a terrible mistake." In 2021, everything changed. South Carolina, desperate to resume executions after a 10-year hiatus due to lethal injection drug shortages, revived the firing squad and electric chair. Inmates were given a choice: die by the needle, if available, the chair, or the bullet. Moore chose bullets. "The electric chair is torture," he wrote in a New York Times op-ed. "The firing squad is at least honest." His decision made headlines, turning him into an unlikely poster child for death penalty reform. Activists rallied outside the prison, holding signs that read, "Killing Richard won't bring back James." Mahoney's family wasn't moved. "He's playing the victim," Sarah Mahoney told reporters. "My dad didn't get to choose how he died." The trial revisited. Moore's 2023 appeals were a Hail Mary. His new lawyers argued that South Carolina's firing squad protocol violated the state's constitution, a cruel and unusual throwback to frontier justice. Prosecutors fired back. "The Constitution doesn't guarantee a painless death, just death." The case reached the state Supreme Court, where justices deadlocked 3-2. Chief Justice John Kittredge, writing for the majority, declared, "The firing squad is no more barbaric than lethal injection, it is merely more visceral." Dissenting Justice Kay Hearn shot back, "We are not savages, we should not kill like them." On the 1st of April, 2024, Moore's final appeal was denied. He'd be the first person executed by firing squad in South Carolina since 1913. The last meal. On the 11th of April, 2024, the night before his execution, Moore was offered his final meal. He declined. "Just a Coke," he told guards. "The real thing, none of that diet crap." He sipped it slowly, staring at the ceiling. When a chaplain asked if he wanted to pray, Moore shook his head. "I've been praying for 23 years. Either God's not listening, or he's got a sick sense of humor." Later, he scribbled in his notebook, $37 and a Coke. That's what my life is worth. Moore spent his last day writing. To his daughters, Jessica and Amber, "I'm so sorry I failed you. Be better than me." To Mahoney's family, "No words can fix what I broke, but I hope my death gives you peace." At 8 p.m., he met with his ex-wife, Carla, for the first time in 15 years. She brought photos of their granddaughters. "They ask about you," she said. Moore traced their faces with his finger. "Tell them I loved them, even if I didn't know how to show it." By midnight, the prison buzzed with tension. Reporters camped outside, broadcasting live updates. Pro- and anti-death penalty protesters clashed in the parking lot, their shouts muffled by the thick prison walls. Moore, calm but pale, chain-smoked Newports until guards confiscated his lighter. "Save these for the shooters," he joked, handing over the pack. The execution. South Carolina's firing squad chamber is a sterile, fluorescent-lit room with a black metal chair bolted to the floor. At 1:45 a.m., Moore was led in, his wrists and ankles cuffed. A white Targeter 4-inch square was pinned over his heart. A black hood was pulled over his head. 5 marksmen stood behind a cinder-block wall, their rifles loaded with .30-30 Winchester rounds. One rifle held a blank. Per protocol, their identities were sealed for life. Warden Travis Cartwright asked Moore if he had final words. His voice trembled but clear. "To the family of Mr. James Mahoney, I am deeply sorry for the pain and sorrow I caused you all. To my children and granddaughters, I love you and am so proud of you. Thank you for the joy you have brought to my life." At 2:10 a.m., the warden signaled. 5 shots echoed. Moore's body jerked against the restraints, then stilled. A doctor pronounced him dead at 2:11 a.m. Outside, Mahoney's daughter Sarah collapsed into her husband's arms. "It's done," she whispered. "It's finally done." Moore's execution made him a martyr. News outlets splashed his final apology across front pages. Politicians called it a necessary evil. Activists called it state-sanctioned murder. His daughters released a statement. "Our father died for $37. When does it end?" In his cell, guards found Moore's Bible dog-eared and underlined a letter to Governor Henry McMaster. "Killing me won't fix what's broken, but maybe sparing the next man will." South Carolina has since scheduled 2 more firing squad executions. Richard Moore, the man who chose bullets over needles, left behind a question etched in blood. In a nation that claims to value redemption, why do we keep killing the redeemed? But why do inmates choose the firing squad? Choosing the firing squad isn't about bravery, it's about control. For inmates facing execution, it's the last decision they'll ever make, and many cling to it like a life raft. Take Ronnie Lee Gardner, who called lethal injection for lab rats before Utah's rifles ended his life in 2010. To him, bullets represented a twisted dignity. "I'd rather die like a man than a piece of meat on a gurney." The firing squad feels primal, almost honest, no hidden needles, no medical theater. It's death stripped bare, and for some, that transparency is a perverse comfort. Others play the legal long game. Opting for the firing squad buys time. When John Albert Burks demanded Oklahoma's bullets in 2022, it triggered months of appeals over the state's untested protocol. Delays are built into the system of re-challenge. Every hearing stretches the clock. Richard Moore, executed in South Carolina in 2024, knew this. His choice forced courts to debate the constitutionality of a method last used in 1913, buying him an extra year of life. "It's not about how you die," one death row lawyer admitted. "It's about when." Then there's faith. In Utah, where the firing squad was once the default for Mormon inmates, some believed in blood atonement, the idea that spilling one's own blood could cleanse the soul before God. Though the church disavowed the doctrine in the 1970s, its shadow lingers. When asked why he chose bullets, one inmate simply said, "God knows my heart. Let him see it stop." Others, like Native American prisoners, cite cultural ties to warrior deaths, while some Christians view the squad's visceral finality as biblical. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But beneath the bravado and strategy lies raw fear. As one death row chaplain put it, they're not choosing bullets over needles. They're choosing the devil they don't know over the devil they do. In the end, it's not about dignity or faith, it's about staring down the barrel of the inevitable and whispering, "My terms." The firing squad's future in America hangs in the crosshairs. With lethal injection drugs scarce and courts tangled in endless appeals, states like South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Mississippi have already dusted off their rifles. Will others follow? Bet on it. As long as executions remain legal, the firing squad offers a grim loophole way for politicians to say, "We're not barbarians, we're just practical." But practicality doesn't equal decency. The Supreme Court once called executions evolving standards of dignity. Yet here we are, recycling a method from the Wild West. Supporters argue it's swift and transparent. Critics fire back. Since when did Swift justify strapping a human to a chair and shooting them in the heart? The truth is, firing squads force us to confront what execution really is: not justice, but vengeance dressed in a bulletproof vest. So, where do you stand? Is this a necessary evil or a moral freefall? Hit like, share your thoughts, and subscribe to True Crime Inquiry, where digging deeper into America's death row secrets next week. Want to know which state is reviving the gas chamber? Or why 80% of executioners quit after 5 years? Hit that bell so you don't miss a second. The bullets will keep flying. The question is, will we keep looking?